This is what the evidence actually says about supporting your eyes against cataracts, and why some of the most popular cures you've heard about don't do what you've been told. By the end of this video, you'll understand what a cataract really is, what raises your risk, what genuinely helps, what doesn't, and what the one proven treatment actually involves. Let's start with the thing itself, because most of the confusion around cataracts comes from not understanding what one actually is. Inside each of your eyes, tucked behind the colored part, sits a natural lens whose only job is to focus light cleanly onto the back of the eye, so you see a sharp image. That lens is built mostly from proteins called crystallins, and for most of your life, they stay neatly arranged and perfectly transparent. A cataract begins when those proteins start clumping together. Once they clump, they scatter incoming light instead of letting it pass through cleanly. And that scattered light is exactly what you experience as cloudy, hazy, or blurred vision. A cataract isn't a film creeping across the surface of your eye, and it isn't something you can rinse or wipe away. It's a change happening deep inside the lens itself, and that one fact explains almost everything else about the condition, including why it arrives so slowly, why it rarely hurts, and why the real fix has to deal directly with the lens. Hold on to that picture, because we'll return to it again and again. The condition is far more common than most people realize. Cataracts are the leading cause of blindness in the world, and they account for roughly half of all blindness on the planet. To put real numbers behind that, around 94 million people aged 50 and over were living with vision impairment or blindness from cataracts in 2020. Estimates from the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation suggest that of everyone who was blind worldwide that year, about 17 million had lost their sight to cataracts, while more than 80 million others lived with moderate to severe visual impairment from the same cause. The trend over the past few decades tells an interesting story. Across the 30 years leading up to 2020, the sheer number of people blinded or visually impaired by cataracts climbed steadily. And yet, the age-adjusted rate of cataract blindness actually fell by more than a quarter over that same stretch. That combination sounds contradictory until you look at demographics. The world's population keeps growing and aging faster than treatment can reach everyone. And researchers who mapped the global burden through 2021 found that population growth was the single biggest force pushing the totals upward. Our treatments are genuinely working, and there are simply more older people each year for cataracts to find. Here's the detail that matters most if you're over 50 and quietly wondering about your own odds. Cataracts are overwhelmingly a condition of age. The prevalence climbs steeply as the years add up, sitting below 4% among people in their late 50s and early 60s, then rising above 90% among those 80 and older. Let that sink in for a moment. By the time people reach their 80s, the clear majority are living with cataracts to some degree. And closer to home, roughly 20 million Americans over the age of 40 already have them, while by the age of 75, about half of all Americans have either developed a cataract or already had surgery to remove one. One more consistent finding shows up across the research, which is that cataracts strike slightly more often in women than in men. If those figures feel alarming, let me reframe them for you. They aren't a warning that something rare is hunting you down, but rather the opposite. Cataracts are simply part of how the eye ages for most of us. The condition is common and thoroughly understood, and it responds well to treatment, which is exactly where the real hope in this story lives. There's a harder truth sitting underneath these global numbers, and skipping past it would be dishonest. The burden of cataracts falls very unevenly across the world. In wealthier countries, surgery has become routine, the outcomes are predictable, and patients can pick from a range of advanced lens options. Across many low and middle-income countries, access to that same surgery lags far behind, and people go blind from a condition that is, in principle, completely fixable. The global burden studies say it plainly, with the heaviest weight landing on the places least equipped to carry it. When we call cataracts a solvable problem, that's true of the medicine, but solving it for everyone is also a question of access and resources. Let's get more specific now, because not every cataract behaves the same way, and the type you have shapes what you'll notice first. Three main types account for most cases. The most common by far is the nuclear sclerotic cataract, which forms right in the center, or nucleus, of the lens, and represents the classic age-related version. It develops slowly, often over many years, as the core of the lens gradually hardens, yellows, and can eventually turn brown, dulling both your color perception and your overall sharpness. Here's the quirk that catches people off guard. In its early stages, a nuclear cataract can shift your focus closer, handing some people a temporary improvement in their reading vision that doctors nickname second sight. It feels like a gift when your reading suddenly sharpens without glasses. Yet, it's only a passing phase rather than a real recovery, and the vision declines from there. The second type, the cortical cataract, takes shape in the outer layer of the lens called the cortex, where it tends to form wedge-shaped streaks pointing inward toward the center, a little like the spokes of a wheel. People living with cortical cataracts usually battle glare and poor contrast most of all, struggling to separate shapes against a busy background, or to drive at night when oncoming headlights seem to scatter and smear across their view. This type can disrupt daily life more abruptly than the slow nuclear version. Then there's the posterior subcapsular cataract, which develops at the very back of the lens, right in the pathway light travels on its way to the retina. Even a small one can cast an outsized shadow over your sight. Folks with this type frequently notice trouble in bright light, along with difficulty reading, and the condition links more often to diabetes and steroid use, while tending to progress faster than the other two. That naturally brings us to the warning signs. Knowing what to watch for may be the single most useful thing you take from this video. The symptoms of cataracts include blurred or hazy or cloudy vision, a growing sensitivity to glare and bright light, colors that look faded or washed toward yellow, halos blooming around lights at night, real difficulty driving after dark, a loss of contrast that flattens the world, and a need to update your glasses prescription far more often than you used to. Remember that second side effect we talked about? Since a sudden, temporary improvement in your reading can itself be an early clue. The thread running through all of these signs is that cataracts arrive gradually and almost never cause pain. There's no sharp moment that screams something is wrong. Instead, the change creeps in, and you adapt without realizing it, switching on more lamps, giving up night driving, drifting closer to the television, slowly surrendering vision you don't even notice you've lost. That quiet, invisible progression is exactly why regular eye exams matter more and more as you age, because a professional can catch the changes in your lens long before you've rebuilt your whole life around a problem you never knew you had. This is the heart of the matter, and the reason for the title on this video. The honest answer surprises a lot of people. Folks want to know what genuinely supports their eyes against cataracts, and what they can actually do about them. So let's separate what truly helps from what doesn't, because a great deal of the marketing out there gets that distinction backwards. Start with what you can actually influence, which means your risk factors. Age stands as the biggest one, and none of us can negotiate with it. Several of the others, though, sit at least partly in your hands. Diabetes and high blood sugar count as a recognized risk because they alter the lens itself. Ultraviolet light from the sun is another, and the World Health Organization estimates that sun exposure may cause or worsen up to 20% of blinding cataracts. Smoking and tobacco speed up the damage to the lens in a dose-related way, meaning the more tobacco, the greater the harm. Long-term use of corticosteroid medications raises the risk further, as do eye injuries and physical trauma. And then there's genetics and family history, which, like age, you simply inherit. A couple of other influences turn up in the research as well. Alcohol use and higher body weight have both been linked to cataract risk in some studies, though the evidence stays mixed enough that I'd file them under possible rather than proven. When people ask what supports their eyes against cataracts, the honest answer starts right here. Shield your eyes from ultraviolet light with good sunglasses. Give up smoking or never start. Keep conditions like diabetes tightly managed. Stay cautious with long-term steroids under your doctor's guidance. And get your eyes examined on a regular schedule. None of that guarantees you'll dodge cataracts forever, since age alone catches most of us in the end. But these are the genuine levers you can pull to lower your risk or slow the process down. Notice what every one of those steps has in common. They're about prevention and protection, never reversal. Once the proteins inside your lens have clumped, no amount of clean living unclumps them, which means the prevention conversation and the treatment conversation are two entirely separate things. And that's the gap where so many people get misled. Which carries us straight into the part where I have to be blunt with you, because this is where the most misleading claims take root. You've almost certainly seen products marketed as the ultimate support for cataracts. The supplements, the antioxidant pills, and above all, the eye drops that promise to dissolve or reverse your cataracts with no surgery at all. The appeal makes complete sense to me. Surgery sounds frightening, and a simple bottle of drops sounds easy. Let's look hard at what the science actually shows, because the truth here could save you both money and false hope. Begin with the antioxidant vitamins and supplements. For years, laboratory work and observational studies hinted that antioxidants might protect the lens. And some of that observational data even suggested multivitamin users showed slower cataract progression, which sounds genuinely promising. Observational data carries a built-in trap, though, because it can't tell you whether the vitamins caused the benefit or whether people who take vitamins simply tend to live healthier in a dozen other ways. To settle the question, the National Eye Institute ran a large, rigorous clinical trial called the Age-Related Eye Disease Study, known as AREDS. And the verdict came back clear, with the antioxidant vitamins they tested showing no effect whatsoever on whether cataracts developed or progressed. As Mayo Clinic Press has summed it up, those observational links exist, but clinical trials have never confirmed them. The marketing, in other words, has sprinted well ahead of the evidence. Now for the big one, the cataract-dissolving eye drops. And this story doubles as a lesson in how science really works. Back in 2015, researchers published a study in the journal Nature showing that a naturally occurring compound called lanosterol could shrink cataracts in rabbits and dogs. The findings set off enormous excitement and circled the globe in the news, since here at last was a possible treatment that skipped the operating room entirely. And a scientist at the National Eye Institute even wrote a hopeful commentary about its promise. What happened next is the part the marketing always leaves out. When independent laboratories tried to reproduce those results in human lenses, the effect vanished. Studies published around 2019 found no evidence that lanosterol could break apart the protein clumps or restore clarity in human cataracts, because the human lens is thicker and far more complex than in animals, and the compound simply couldn't deliver in people what the headlines had promised. This is science behaving exactly as it should, where an exciting result gets published, other scientists test it on their own, and the honest conclusion gets reported when it fails to hold up. The trouble is that the thrilling headline raced around the world while the quiet correction barely left the lab. The drops on sale today deserve a precise verdict. No eye drop has won FDA approval to prevent, dissolve, or reverse cataracts in human beings. Many of the products sold as cataract dissolvers amount to unregulated supplements that never passed the clinical testing real medical approval demands. Another compound you'll spot on the shelves, called NAC, is an antioxidant whose best case evidence suggests it might slow progression, yet it does nothing to reverse a cataract you already have. The American Academy of Ophthalmology and eye specialists stand united on this point, that no proven drop or pill cures cataracts. I'm not laying this out to strip away your hope. I'm laying it out because the genuinely good news beats any eye drop on the market. And that good news is where we head next. A treatment that truly works does exist, and it performs astonishingly well. That treatment is surgery. Before you tense up at the word, let me walk you through what it involves, where it came from, and why it has earned your trust. Because the history itself explains why you can rely on it. Humans have been attacking cataracts since ancient times. Thousands of years ago in India, a technique called couching pushed the clouded lens aside inside the eye with a needle or a thorn. And one of the earliest written accounts of it comes down to us from the Greek philosopher Chrysippus of Soli. Couching is nothing anyone should attempt today, and it still surfaces occasionally in traditional medicine across parts of Africa and Asia. But it shows how stubbornly long people have wrestled with this problem. Centuries later, in 1753, the surgeon Samuel Sharp carried out the first recorded removal of the entire lens, lifting it out through an incision in the eye. That advance came at a heavy cost, since a patient left without any lens at all, a state doctors call aphakic, then depended on absurdly thick cataract glasses that were maddening to adjust to. For most of the early 20th century, removing the whole lens and capsule and leaving the eye without any lens stood as the ordinary standard of care. The real revolution arrived through an English ophthalmologist named Sir Harold Ridley, and the way he stumbled onto his idea still amazes me. During the Second World War, Ridley noticed something strange in wounded pilots. Because when splinters of acrylic plastic from shattered cockpit canopies lodged in their eyes, those eyes refused to reject the material, the way they violently rejected glass. That single observation lit the spark. If the eye tolerated this particular plastic, he reasoned, then a surgeon might shape an artificial lens from it and set it inside the eye to replace the cloudy one, sparing the patient from aphakia and those punishing spectacles. Across 1949 and 1950, at St. Thomas's Hospital in London, Ridley did precisely that, implanting the first permanent artificial lens, the device we now call an intraocular lens, or IOL. A company named Rayner manufactured the lens for that first operation, and the same firm still ranks among the leading lens makers today. The achievement was almost impossibly delicate. The human lens measures only about 10 millimeters across and 4 millimeters thick, so building something that tiny that also had to focus light correctly was an extraordinary feat for its era. Here's something most people never learn about that breakthrough. Ridley considered the idea so radical that he kept it secret at first, calling the operation revolutionary rather than evolutionary, and bracing for fierce criticism before he dared announce it. The criticism duly arrived. Once his work became public, he ran into years of skepticism and resistance from the medical establishment, including some of the most prominent eye surgeons of the day, because the traditional creed held that a surgeon's job was to take things out of the eye, not to plant a foreign object permanently inside it. Ridley fought for acceptance straight through the 1950s and 60s, and at one point, the sheer weight of the attacks drove him into the hospital with depression. He later reflected that the long controversy had deprived a whole generation of cataract patients of restored sight. It would be easy to tell this as a tidy fable about a lone genius crushed by jealous rivals. And for a long while, that was the popular version. More recent histories paint a fairer and frankly more interesting picture. The cautious doctors weren't merely close-minded, because Ridley's early lenses did carry real flaws, and Ridley himself made genuine mistakes, coming across in one account as thoroughly, fallibly human. The truer story is a collision between an inventor racing to crack an enormous problem and established leaders who worried, not unreasonably, about harming patients with an imperfect device. One historian wrote that for decades, Ridley drew support from a few visionaries, yet found himself defamed by many. Acceptance for intraocular lenses didn't take hold until the 1970s, and today, Ridley stands recognized as the father of the intraocular lens, the man whose idea restored sight to tens of millions of people. The technique kept improving long after Ridley. A second great leap landed in 1967, when the surgeon Charles Kellman introduced a method called phacoemulsification, essentially the same approach surgeons rely on today. That modern operation unfolds in a way that surprises most first-timers with its speed and simplicity. Your surgeon uses ultrasonic energy to gently break the clouded lens apart, removes the fragments, and slides a clear, artificial intraocular lens into its place. Start to finish, the procedure usually takes under 30 minutes. It runs on an outpatient basis, so you head home the very same day. And it has grown into the single most commonly performed surgical procedure in many countries. The results speak for themselves. Reported success rates for restoring functional vision sit around 90% and higher, and somewhere near 20 million of these procedures take place worldwide every single year. The typical patient comes in around 65 years old, and that average age has actually drifted younger over time, as more people choose to fix the problem early instead of living with vision that keeps slipping away. Those benefits reach beyond simply seeing more clearly, since research cited by the American Academy of Ophthalmology links cataract surgery to meaningfully lower odds of a hip fracture and lower odds of a car accident, which makes perfect sense once you realize that sharper vision brings fewer falls and safer driving. A procedure that restores your sight can, in the most literal way, make the rest of your life safer. The choices open to you have widened in welcome ways too. Your artificial lens no longer comes in a single style, since you can now choose among standard monofocal lenses, toric lenses that correct astigmatism, multifocal lenses designed to give you clear vision at more than one distance, and even adjustable lenses. Some surgeons also offer laser-assisted techniques, where a precise laser handles part of the work that surgeons once did entirely by hand. The right pick depends on your eyes, your daily life, and your particular needs, which makes it a conversation for you and your own surgeon rather than something to settle from a video. Let me be straight about the practical side as well, because cost weighs on a lot of minds. The price of cataract surgery swings widely, shaped by where you live, your insurance coverage, the type of facility, and the lens you select. I won't toss a single dollar figure at you as though it fit everyone, because the published numbers vary enormously and frequently aren't even measuring the same thing, given that a surgeon's professional fee, a facility fee, an out-of-pocket retail price, and an insurance negotiated rate can each land miles apart. Premium lenses, like the multifocal or adjustable designs, generally add to the bill and may fall outside insurance coverage, since they often count as elective upgrades. The practical move is simple. Ask your provider for a clear, itemized breakdown of what's covered and what isn't, so nothing blindsides you later. One thing I can tell you without hesitation. For an established cataract that's interfering with your life, surgery remains the only proven, effective treatment, and it has handed clear sight back to a staggering number of people across the globe. Let's circle back to where we began. The ultimate support for cataracts isn't a miracle eye drop, because none has ever been proven to work in human beings. And it isn't an antioxidant supplement that reverses the clouding, because the most rigorous clinical trial we have found no such effect. The honest, evidence-based answer arrives in two parts, and they line up precisely with the two halves of everything we've covered today. Before a cataract ever becomes a problem, your support is prevention and protection. Guard your eyes against ultraviolet light with proper sunglasses. Quit smoking or never pick it up. Keep conditions like diabetes well managed. Treat long-term steroids with caution under your doctor's guidance. And book regular eye exams so any change gets caught early. Age will still catch up with most of us in the end, and that failure belongs to no one. Yet these remain the real levers within your reach. Once a cataract genuinely starts stealing your vision, your support becomes the one thing that actually restores it. That something is a safe, fast, outpatient surgery built on more than 70 years of refinement since Harold Ridley first dared to slip a sliver of plastic inside a human eye, and sharpened further by everyone who followed him. The clouded lens is not a sentence you have to serve, and it is certainly not a stain you can rinse away with a bottle ordered off some website. It is a part that can be replaced, cleanly and reliably. Cataracts rank among the most common things that will ever happen to your eyes, and among the most solvable problems in all of medicine. Sorting truth from marketing is the first real step in protecting your sight. If this video helped you, the best move you can make is to talk with an eye care professional about your own eyes, because nothing supports your vision better than catching trouble early and getting real, proven care. Take good care of your eyes, because they have to last you a lifetime.